A very warm welcome to Capital Sports 3.0. I'm your host for this evening. I'm solo today. Well, kind of solo, but we'll have a guest coming in one moment. Of course, my name is Alan Moore, and we have a very special, interesting show for you because it's not very often that as a journalist, as a sports host, as a commentator, that you get to speak with people who you kind of can say, you had a huge impact on me in sports and in life as well. One, of course, was a good few years ago. We're still in contact with Paul Kimmage, who basically ruined my final exams in school with his book. And this next person, just because of one line in the movie that he had, or actually a couple lines in the movie, that kind of just went like, do you know what? It's not about winning and losing. It's about just going out and giving it your best. And it always comes back to me as well when Johnny Giles would say that I don't want lads running off the field full of energy. I want them crawling off the field saying, I've done all I can. That's all I can do. And me working as a coach, same thing. I say to players, listen, put in your best, do your best. And of course, I would say to enjoy it as well. But that's the Irish man coming out of me. But I want to speak with a man who was not only one of the, in his day, and that makes him sound old, he's not old, but he was one of the finest central defenders in England. He would have won a lot more than 11 caps had there not been such a huge clatter of great centre backs in England in the time in the late 70s and mid 80s, especially, of course, one of my boyhood idols, Billy Bonds, who didn't win a cap for England. So I am delighted to welcome onto the show to speak about his playing career and, of course, something very, very special that he did during his playing career that had, as I mentioned, a huge impact on my life. Mr. Russell Osman. Russell, you're very welcome to Capital Sports. First, question I always want to ask, how's the weather with you? Oh, we can...
That's it. I've got the picture as well.
That's the one. That's the one. That's the one. And it's that moment, and that photo of you, of course, on your T-shirt is when you're watching the penalty kick being taken.
Yeah.
Like the final penalty kick, and you can't watch it. And we've all been through that. But okay, we're going to go on to escape to victory in just a moment. But first of all, Russell, you had an outstanding career. You were with that brilliant, I would say almost swashbuckling, but all beating Ipswich Town team of the late 70s and up to the mid 80s. Of course, looked after by Bobby Robson. First question, what was Bobby Robson like as a coach?
Obviously, he was very good as a coach. He had a knack of being able to get a squad of players together that might not be full of superstars, but the back four could play well together in front of the goalkeeper that they got on with. The wide players worked well with the central midfield players. And I think he said it was like a jigsaw puzzle, having to try and get the pieces fit as closely and as snugly as possible together. Now, he said nobody has to be a superstar in the team if they can't play with the person next to them. So the 78 side that won the FA Cup, that team got changed. And a couple of years later, we went and won the UEFA Cup in 1981 with really, a completely different team. So he was very good at just getting a good balanced side. We weren't predominantly down one side or the other. We were as good at the back as we were going forward. We were as good in possession of the ball or defending. So, we attacked as a team. We defended as a team. And what he insisted on was that we had very, very good basics. And he said your foundation like any building, your foundations have got to be rock solid. And we would do passing drills day in, day out. And that's with a squad full of international players. He still said, you have to hone these skills to be very good at them. But you've never mastered them. You can always get better. So we were doing repetitive passing drills time and time again. And we were very fit. They worked ran the legs off us if we weren't playing midweek games, which wasn't very often. it was easier for us to play a match than it was to have a training session. So we were fit, we were competitive, and we could keep possession of the ball well.
As a central defender, I mean, central defenders come in for a lot of abuse, and it's very physical. But you stayed pretty fit, and you played. You had a very, very long career playing at a good level the whole way through. Finishing up, of course, in Cardiff City. What for you were the key elements to stay in that kind of shape? Was it mental, or was it a mix of physical and mental? And what drove you on?
I think it's a bit of both. It's having resilience built into how you grow up into the football team. I played rugby at school. I was an England schoolboy rugby player, so I got used to getting banged around a little bit. That was no problem. You can see from the scars on the eyes and the bent nose that I didn't get away totally unscathed. But take I think 79-80 season, I played every game. 80-81 season, I played every game. So that was 66 and 50, so 120 games. And we did escape to victory in the middle of it. We didn't have a summer break. So that was a lot of football. There were games really that I probably shouldn't have played or lucky to get through. But because of the structure that we had as a team, I had somebody like Terry Butcher alongside me that I could rely on, that, I could get through a game 80% and Terry would, cover the other 20% that I struggled with.
Again, when you mentioned Terry Butcher, I mean, you think of the players that you played with. And again, I'm not going to go into Southampton right now. Just look at that Ipswich team. Most people, of course, are going to remember John Wark, and of course, he also was in Escape to Victory as well. Was it because, I mean, many of my teams, they have like great parts, but the sum of the parts doesn't add up. But you had great parts, and the sum added up. It's not just down to Bobby Robson. What is it down to? Is it down to kind of what goes on out in Ipswich, or what is it?
No, we were allowed sort of poetic license, if you want to call it that. When we played, that there was a structure to how we played. We had a basic understanding of how Ipswich Town Football Club played the game. They passed the ball very well. They tried to keep the ball on the floor, moved it quickly. We ended up with a system where Johnny Walk was our defensive midfield player, anchor man in midfield, but he still had the license to get forward as often as he wanted. And it was down to Johnny to pick when was the right time to go, when was the right time to stay. And Johnny happened to end up being our top goal scorer year in, year out. Mauner scored a few goals and was a magnificent centre forward. Alan Brazil was the same. But Walkie would just make runs through between them, late runs into the 18-yard box. He scored from crosses in general play as well as set pieces. He took penalties. But he had that freedom, and all the players had the freedom to express themselves. And I think in today's modern game, I think the players are told what they've got to do, when they've got to do it, and where they've got to do it on the pitch. And it is producing a bit of a stagnant game for us.
And that's the good point, is like that there isn't that kind of, as you mentioned, that kind of like a freedom to create as well. Because when you look through the teams, you also had, and I didn't mention them specifically because people kind of mix up where, like who he shone with, in my opinion, like Arnold Nuren, the Dutch player. And again, at the time, Franz Tyson as well. And at the time, there weren't that many non-UK or Irish players in the league, or in like English football. But then you also have, of course, like as you mentioned, like John Wark, Alan Brazil, and Paul Mariner as well. And all these players kind of just like seem to gel. Mick Mills as well, I remember as a kid watching. Do you think, though, that Ipswich deserved at least one or two league titles in that time? Because we know that Liverpool were growing into their pomp, but for me, I always felt that Ipswich kind of fell short, but not through any fault of their own.
Yeah, I think we came runners up twice whilst I was playing there. In 80-81, when we won the UEFA Cup, we ended up playing 66 games that season, and we didn't have a squad strong enough to deal with that. So we got to the final of the UEFA Cup, which we won. We got knocked out of the FA Cup at the semi-final stage by Manchester City, and Aston Villa won the league that season ahead of us. They only played something like 46, 48 games, so nearly 20 games less than we did that season. And we didn't have a strong enough squad to cope with that. Not week in, week out. We lost George Burley early on in the season. We lost Kevin Beattie, semi-final of the FA Cup. He broke his arm. Then George had a cruciate knee injury. So we went into the crux of the season, the last sort of 6 weeks of the season, struggling for a squad. We have people like Kevin Steggles come in and play a couple of games for us, but the games were like quarter-final of the UEFA Cup against St Etienne, semi-final of the UEFA Cup against Cologne. And these were more or less the only first-team games that the lad played all season. And he did a brilliant job and got us through to the final. But the problem was having to play so many games. It was a bit grueling, and we lost Van Tyson for a few games, and it was just not having a big enough, strong enough squad.
And of course, well, people now, I mean, I'd say most people under like 30 and under won't understand that you didn't have a whole bench of lads to throw on. You couldn't make 3, 4, 5 substitutions. It was like, it was severely limited. And I think it varied on competition. How many, just to shock people, how many subs could you use in the first division at the time?
Well, I remember the days when we were only allowed one substitute. I had a playing goal for 40 minutes in one game because Paul Cooper got injured. I kept a clean sheet, thank you. And I think that's all it was. Later on, I think it went to 3 subs, but probably for 90% of my career, we only ever played with one sub.
Yeah.
Kevin O'Callaghan, he was also an escape to victory. He spent a lot of time on the bench. After we signed him from Millwall, he thought he'd come and get in the Ipswich side pretty comfortably, but he couldn't get ahead of Arnold Muir and couldn't get ahead of Alan Brazil, and had to wait his turn.
Of course, we mentioned that's one of the most horrific movie moments. It's up there with Misery, with James Caan and Kathy Bates in Misery.
Yeah.
The arm break incident. I think people remember that. I was like, why did he have to do the Irish guy, and why was he playing in goals? So it's sort of
a big cook with that.
I remember asking my dad at the time when I was a kid, going, he's not our goalkeeper, and I knew who our goalkeeper was, and Dad's like, no, I don't know why, but. With your English career, as I said in the intro, there was such a huge, I said a clatter of players who were, England seemed to just keep to pump out really good central defenders, not just big hard men who could clear the ball. They had them, lots of them, but they also had men like you who could score goals, who could get up for set pieces, who could actually push up and play the ball. And of course, as I mentioned in the intro, Billy Bonds, he didn't get a cap for England as far as I know. He got a B cap. But that was the competition. There doesn't seem to be that same kind of production line in England at the moment. Is it because, in my head I'm still there, but that they've moved away from defenders and want sort of out and out ball players come from defence?
I think so. I think that's more or less hitting the nail on the head. I think they want players to be able to be comfortable in possession of the ball, and they are prepared to sacrifice some of the defensive qualities to do that. We see it time and time again that players get caught out in basic defending situations week in, week out, usually caused by trying to play out from the back. And then the defending isn't up to scratch. But you go back to when I played, I mean, we're talking about people like Dave Watson, Phil Thompson. You mentioned Billy Bonds. Billy Bonds was kept out of the side by Alvin Martin, another West Ham mate of yours. There was Steve Foster. There was Terry Fenwick played at the back. There's a lot of players there, you know. And I think the art of defending has gone out of the game a little bit. There isn't the onus on it nowadays. You know, it's like we said with the way they play. You know, you do this when you get there, and that's what's expected of you. I think in set pieces and defending, it's the same. And you see players don't expect the teammate to get beat in the air, you know, and it suddenly comes as a surprise. We were always taught that you always expect the person alongside you to make a mistake. So if I made a mistake, Terry Butcher would cover me, or Kevin Beattie would, or whoever was playing at left back, Mick Mills, or George Burley, for example. And a lot of goals come from not just one mistake, two mistakes. One, the bloke who's missed the ball, and then his teammate not being in a position to cover him and bail him out. But we did produce a lot of very good centre halves, and I'm sure there's one or two that I've missed there. I remember growing up watching Roy McFarland and Colin Todd at Derby County. You know, great players there. You know, a dying breed though.
Again, you know, growing up, and then of course when Ireland started to improve under Jack Charlton, of course, a central defender who could also play ball, who could score goals, who was, you know, who had the ability to move up the field as well. But he had, like, you know, rocks in the central defence, but also he had, for example, Paul McGrath, who could also play central defender, but in front, like, you know, defensive midfielder as well, and play the ball. But do you think that the modern game, it sounds like we're just like these, like, you know, old guys at the bar complaining, but they're not doing that.
Yeah,
we are. Like, yeah. I'm at the table, so. Do you think that kind of is it a thing that would come around? Because there was a time when, say, for example, I mean, you've seen it with the Dutch players, that lovely, like, free flowing football. But then, for example, the Germans would be more pragmatic, and then the Spanish come in with this, like, high tempo running. Do you think it's just a kind of a temporary cyclical thing that the coaches will start to cop on and say, we can play 4-4-2 and have two big strong defenders, a big lad up front with a small lad beside him, and we can score goals and not concede them?
Listen, at the moment, we're seeing a lot more long throw specialists come into the game. Teams are prepared to chuck the ball into the 18-yard box from a long throw, yet they're a little bit reluctant to cross the ball into the 18-yard box from general play, which is a bit strange, you know, for me to say. But I watch Ipswich play. Their possession-based team, their philosophy is about possession. And if it's on the wide flanks and you think, well, get the cross in, and they don't, but it goes out for a throw in and suddenly they're hurling it onto the near post. You think, why don't you do that in general play a little bit more? Well, you know, football does produce fads here, there and everywhere, and it's possession and playing out from the back. I don't think it's doing the supporters any favours, because it's slowing the game down a bit. The whole thing with VAR is a problem for the supporters. Players cheat these days a lot more than they used to. You know, they go down pretending that they've been hurt. So there's more stoppages in the game, I feel. You talk about Jack Charlton. Jack Charlton played in a team, Leeds United. They're called Dirty Leeds. You know, but he played alongside Norman Hunter behind Johnny Giles, Billy Bremner, Alan Clark, Joe Jordan in the side, and they could all look after themselves physically. But Johnny Giles was saying the other day, he said, listen, I don't want us to be remembered as a dirty team. He said, we were hard and we could fight with anybody. He said, but we weren't the only ones with tough players in our side. Look at the Chelsea team, Chopper Harris, Eddie McCready, people like that. He said, every team had players that could look after themselves. And that was part and parcel of the game. Yes, you had to play football, but you had to earn the right to play. You look at the pitches were diabolical in those days. Nowadays you're getting a lovely pitch to play on, lovely opportunity to pass the ball around. Yet we still feel that we have to pretend we've been hurt when we've been in a tackle. But they've been in a tackle because they don't expect to be tackled anymore.
And I think that's something that, that's true, because I was just talking with a few years ago with Vedran Chorluka, who played with, he was playing at the time in Lokomotiv Moscow. I was working with the club, and he played in the Premier League with Spurs and played international course with Croatia. And he just said like that in Croatia growing up, they would, I lived in Croatia and I played football there, and they would love to throw themselves on the ground, but they'd also be tough and rough and hard, and they had central defenders who were central defenders, and they'd give it and take it, and they would really, they'd fight you. And he said that the biggest issue he found in 2018 was that a lot of players don't know how to take a tackle. They don't know how to ride a tackle. They'll throw themselves away, or they kind of they're actually terrified to actually say, okay, if I stay on my feet and I get my legs taken out from underneath me, I'll actually fall on you, man, and put an elbow down. Or they couldn't protect themselves. And he said that he said it's not a dying art. I asked him, is it a dying art? Defending. He goes, it's not a dying art. He said, it's a dying game.
Yeah. We've got a point there that we've got to be very careful of. That, if it gets any worse than what it is at the moment, it won't be a spectacle for people to spend the sort of money that they are doing in coming and watching it. And then you won't get the TV revenue, etc., etc. You look at how George Best used to play, and the tackles used to fly in on George Best, on Maradona, on Messi, on Cristiano Ronaldo. Now, I know some of those lads are still playing, but they could see a bad challenge coming a mile away, and they would try and ride it. Bestie just used to skip over them. I played with Matt Letizia for three and a half years down at Southampton. What fantastic balance that fella had, and it could be on a really muddy, wet, slippy pitch, but he'd just skip over challenges. He'd see them coming, he'd just stop the ball and let them slide across him. But when you're not expecting to get tackled because they don't tackle in training, then on a match day, you go in for a tackle, and the biggest problem I feel is that players scream and they squeal when they've been tackled. I think it's more from surprise that somebody's actually gone in and had the audacity to try and tackle them. And they squeal, and then the ref panics and he blows the whistle thinking, well, must have hurt him, so it must have been a foul. Yeah. It could have been a good tackle. But if you're not expecting to be tackled, it is going to hurt. But, it's strange.
It is something that you played and you grew up with it. And I watched it, played and grew up with it, where a good hard tackle from a defender when he wins the ball. And I usually played sort of a sweeper in defence, or in front or behind the back four. Yeah. And we slide in, win the ball and stand up with the ball. People love it. They get excited. But now it's, the defenders, they're terrified because, as you said, a screech and all of a sudden it's a yellow card, a red card, or a penalty. Yeah. If it's in your own box.
What I don't like is that defenders could now play for free kicks on their own 18-yard box. When they're coming out with the ball and the striker touches them, rather than clear the ball, they'll go down looking for a free kick themselves. And you think,
Yeah.
Frustrating.
Um, what like before we move into the second part, not the more important part, because this is massively important. Two questions to move on with. Your dad, of course, played, and he played up in Derby and had a solid career. Did you ever feel under pressure that you had to follow in his footsteps, or was it pressure to follow in his footsteps?
No pressure whatsoever. No pressure at all. I have 3 brothers and a sister, and sport was just part and parcel of our growing up. I and my brothers, we all played sport at school, all to varying degrees of success. My older brother, he captained England schoolboys at rugby the year before I did. But there's no pressure for my father. He played with people like Jackie Stamp and people like that at Derby, and he was probably one of my biggest supporters. He collected a lot of programs and newspaper cuttings for me, and when he was still alive, it was great to see him still come to games.
Did he give you any advice?
No, I don't think he did, really. He gave me a hell of a lot of support just by being there. And I think support and encouragement goes a long way. He probably did give me some advice along the lines, but I would be making it up to think of something now. So I would just go with support and encouragement, and a pat on the back, whether you played well or whether you played disappointingly. A pat on the back goes a long way.
Again, I think it's the best way to do it. And unfortunately, a lot of it gets lost too often in the winning and the losing, and taking the game too seriously, taking sport too seriously. And yeah. I mean, the fact that both you and your brother played rugby showed that it was coming from a kind of a well-rounded sports family is always important. And do you think it's important for kids to have that as well? Not just the encouragement, not just taking part, but actually to get something out of it, to enjoy sport.
I think we have to be very careful, and obviously the clubs are aware of this matter, is dealing with the expectations of parents more than actually looking after the kids on the pitch. You don't want to, as a coach, when you turn around and you're trying to explain to a kid either why he's been left out or why he didn't play that well that particular game, and then his parents are telling him he was the best player and it was the best game that they'd ever seen him play. He's getting mixed messages there, and we all see it every weekend on the side of schools' pitches that the biggest, loudest people there are usually the parents, and a lot of the time they're the people that know the least about the game themselves, and they can put a heck of a lot of pressure on the kids because of their expectations. The clubs trawler fish for players nowadays, so they gather up a lot of young players, and the more players that they gather up, the more players are going to have to disappoint when it comes to the time that they release those players. So there has to be things in place to let the kids down softly. There was an amazing fact that Arsene Wenger mentioned a while ago, that of all the players between the age of, I think it was 17 and 21, that have already made it into professional football, by the time they're 22, 75% of them are no longer involved in professional football. Don't quote me on the actual numbers, but it was that ridiculous.
It's well over half. Yeah.
And this is from kids that have already made it. They've got into clubs. They've got into the academies. They've got a pro contract. Yet by the time they're 22, they're not involved in football at any level.
Russ, I think it is something that I remember I always asked, and it was Damien Richardson, who's the ex-Irish player, and I managed Gillingham as well, and played with Gillingham. And he used to say to players, youth players, do you love football or love being a footballer? And the old, like kids, little kids were going, football is fine.
Yeah.
But and he said, ask the players that you're working with. Ask it, and I have interviews with pros at different levels, different leagues, different countries, and a few of them said, "Oh yeah, love being a footballer is a great life." And I'm thinking, so I wonder, is that the pressure comes on them that they have to be a footballer instead of playing football? So there's more. There were more distractions when you were playing because there were, there was less control than now. Like
less recording devices.
That's what I was going to say. There's less mobile phones on the go, so yeah, you're safer to go out and have a drink or to act a maggot. But do you think that's kind of lost with the players? Because I noticed there was something that I was just watching a few videos like of the Irish team, for example, playing against Hungary and so on, and like this is from the 80s and from the 70s and early 90s. Very few players for any team had tattoos. Yeah. And now it seems to be the only way that they can express themselves outside that very tight structure of football and is tattoos. Or maybe I'm just reading it wrong. Maybe I'm overthinking it.
Yeah, well, I think you've got a point. But I also feel that there's a situation arising where there's a lot more players that are happy to sit on the bench. They have 9 substitutes on the bench these days, and they get used to just sitting there, picking the wages up, whether they get on for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I'm not saying that is carte blanche across the whole spectrum, but there will be a heck of a lot of players that are quite happy just to be a footballer, as you call it, and sit on the bench, and they might only get 10 minutes of actually playing football. Now, people ask me about pressure situations and playing in the Nou Camp at Barcelona in front of 100,000 people. I said, what was that like? And I said, well, I'm playing football with my mates. It's me and my mates going out to play football. Where's the pressure in that? And they say, yeah, but what about the crowd? I said, well, you don't really notice the crowd because you're chatting and, your mates are taking the mickey out of you or somebody's joking about something, All you want to do is go out and get the game going.
Again, it's something that I work with, especially with professional tennis players. And I remember one of the girls used to say in interviews, she said, "Oh yeah, like it was another tough day at the office." And I said to her, "Listen, you've just been out on Roland Garros. You won the first round. You're into the second round. You're playing on red clay. It's not an office. You don't have to check in 9 to 5. You're not living paycheck to paycheck. Stop. But it was something that she gotten into her head, just to sort of this easy speak that she heard from commentators. So she heard the commentators saying it like a tough day at the office, and so she started to say it as well. It's like, no, like you playing. And that's what we wanted to before we move on to
we pay for bonuses as well, though, Alan.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
A lot of our money was made up by, how well you did. So, if you win 3-4 games in the month, your pay packet is going to be a lot heavier than it would if you've been beat 3 or 4 times that month, and that's what you were playing for.
Is that this is a question I've never asked anyone before? Is that a motivation? Does that spur you on? Like among the lads can say, Jesus, if we win this match, we're on a bonus, like we're on $2,000 bonus or something. Is that a motivation?
It was in those days, yeah.
Okay, because I know the salaries. I understand that, yeah.
Because if you were on £500 a week back in the late 70s, still good money, at that time, but you could pick up another £700-800 bonus by the end of the month, depending on where you are and how it had worked out. So you sort of doubling your money. You know, and it was a case of me or the centre forward that I'm playing against. One of us is going to get that bonus today. Now, how much do I want it compared to how much does he want it? I'm going to kick his backside and he's going to give me a good kicking as well, you know, if it comes to that. And you'll just see who comes out on top. And if your teammates let you down, you turn around to them and they used to say, listen, you're costing me my mortgage.
And again,
that's what it was then.
Yeah, I mean, because again, people don't understand that this kind of, you know, £50,000 a week wasn't like, and they still, and again, this is this thing of like, you know, football versus footballers, like what are they making? It's like, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, you know, I remember the Irish team when they came back and we were surprised they got like £2,000 punt, like Irish, £2,000 bonuses for playing in the 88 Euros, and people in Ireland thinking, is that much for a footballer? Surely they earn more. But I think it was who was it? Not Dave O'Leary. It might have been Ray Houghton. He was with Liverpool at the time. I think he was on 600 a week. Yeah. So you know, it seems like he got $2,000. Like he got a month's bonus. Yeah. So, but you know, on the final question, this part, it's. I've heard only from your work on TV and radio, and especially abroad, actually, abroad, people saying your commentary, and you know, well, I don't like to say punditry, but your views were always very good, and as people say, a typical defender, because defenders seem to analyze things better. They have again, from playing the game, you're seeing the whole field in front of you, and like, whereas strikers will be just up against defenders, midfielders against midfielders usually, but defenders have everything coming on top of them compared to keepers who are a bit crazy. But like, you, do you get, what's the buzz like working in media compared to working on the bench or on the field? Is there any comparison at all between them?
No, I don't think so. Nothing compares to playing. I think when you look at your commentary work, it's very hard to let your passions overtake you. You know, even though you'd like to, some days you've got to be quite sensible in the way you come over as a commentator and a pundit. You know, you want to give a sensible point of view about everything. I think as a centre half as well, your centre halves used to have to be your most dependable people in the team. The manager would need to know that you're going to be producing an 8 out of 10 performance week in, week out. Now and again a 10 out of 10, but very, very rarely could you get away with performing only 6 out of 10, say. You know, that wouldn't be acceptable from a centre half. You can't have them great 1 minute and bloody hopeless the next. You know, you had to have that consistency, and because of that, you had to have a consistent point of view of how you see the game and how you interpret it.
And again, as I said, I've always found central defenders, when they're speaking of football, have a much better view, you know, and they have, like, you know, like midfielders, because they're kind of midfielders don't have to have their head on a swivel, whereas defenders do, because you need to look behind to see if the keeper's there. If they let the ball go, give a back pass or whatever. So it's very difficult. Look, we're going to move on. We're going to play an intro to the final part of this, because I've kept you on for a long time. I will let you go now.
How long will it take?
Well, you must realize it's my busy time. Everybody wants to escape in the good weather.
In 1942, the Nazis thought they were sitting on top of the world, never suspecting that they could be toppled in one conflict. the most unusual battle of the war.
It has been decided that a German national team will play a combined team from the prisoners of war of the occupied territories.
That's crazy.
Okay, I'm ready to sign up.
Sign up, Hank.
And you ought to be exhibited in Paris like performing fleas. What about me?
Get out of here.
A stacked game. The Third Reich's finest against a ragged bunch of prisoners of war. The Germans thought they had it made.
They couldn't run about for 90 minutes. They'd be chucking their guts up.
Am I good or am I good?
What's your name?
You know my name.
What's your name?
I decided to join the team.
The American? No.
You use that bloody American style again here and you'll be barred.
Look, you're playing English, I play American.
Can you do it with your mouth shut?
Hey, the mouth and the hands work together. It's a team.
This match is a propaganda stunt for the Germans. It's a wonderful opportunity for us.
The Allied High Command called them crazy, and maybe they were.
We want you to contact the resistance for us and arrange the escape of the football team.
But I want to thank you all for your concern, but I'm really not planning on seeing Paris until after the war. Well, I'm an orphan. I have no parents, no money, I'm not married. I don't even have a pet. And anything I might say in my sleep to the contrary can't be held against me.
We don't want to be shot as a spy, do we?
No. I don't want to be shot as anything.
Victory, starring Sylvester Stallone, Michael Caine, Max von Sydow, and introducing Pele.
How'd you like to play football against the Germans?
Why not?
Now is the time for heroes. Victory. You've never seen anything like it.